so much for sending your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, to this earth, who suffered blood and died on that cross so that we can have forgiveness of our sins, eternal salvation, and heaven with thee. We pray that you're please be with the sick of our congregation and those that are going through medical issues and challenges in their life, that you're with them and you help them pull through if it be your will. We know that if we can't do it ourselves, that's the part that you take over and mold our hearts and give us that strength and courage to get through the tribulations that we face here on earth. We pray that you please forgive us for our sins and you're with us today as we study your word, that you have us prepared this lesson for us this morning for Bible study, that we take this message and apply it to our everyday lives and spread your message to others. Our purpose here is to teach others and save the lost, bring those straight back to their shepherd, which is you, Lord. We pray that you're with us each and every day and guide our protect us and keep us safe. And all these things we pray in Jesus Christ's name, our Lord and Savior. Amen. Amen.
Can you make sure that this is, Mark, can you hear me? Oh, here we go. Thank you. He's got to wait to keep it his father quiet. He tries. Exactly. So this is we are still in the section of respecting distinctions between men and women in the church. And by the way, I turned the AC completely off because I had it for 70 and it felt still a little bit warm. So I turn it off. The temperature looks fine. I think it's 68. If it gets colder or warmer, just let me know. Let us know and we can change it. But temperature is perfect right now. It's like we don't have to do anything with the AC unit. Let's read again this section, please, and then we will go where we left last week. So who wants to read verses 8 through 11 of this section? Jeff, you want to start?
I desire, therefore, that the men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands, without wrath and doubting. In like manner also, that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission.
Very good. And 12 through 15, please. Somebody else? Aaron? Very good. So I'm just going to go really quickly on what we studied last week. We focused on what Paul thinks about how women should adorn themselves with modest appearance, with propriety, with moderation. We talked a little bit about the idea of braided hair or wearing costly jewelry or clothing. And we saw that it's not wrong for women to wear jewelry or wear nice things. But outward adornment should not be emphasized or worn to stand out or to draw attention. So it's certainly a lady should dress nice, right? I mean, what does that mean? She dresses like, with rags, and of course not. That's foolish. But it should not be, hey, look at me. Just everybody's drawing attention to her because of how she's dressed. And we all understand what that means. We all have seen people dressed this way, and that's really, I believe we have consensus that that's really what's discussing here. It's not just to have clean and, hair pulled together and just keeping yourself really taken care of. So, and that's really where we left it last week. So, verse 10 says, but which is proper for a woman professing godliness with good works. So, I have a quote there from Vines, which says that the word godliness, contrary to the opinion of some, does not mean godlikeness, but rather denotes that piety which characterized by a Godward attitude, which means one that does, which is well pleasing to God. So that's really what godliness means according to Vines. It's a very important word for us to seek really to be a godly person, and that's really what it is. It means to seek to please God. And then he says with good works, with good works. And I have another quote from another Bible scholar. He says, rather than depending on what she herself simply puts on the outside, the ultimate adornment of a life of a good works is loving sacrifice, which she puts on. So that's really what it means with good works. And we understand the idea of good works. You can perform good works, and it could be really can bring a person, helps a person grow. And so you see here in verse 10, Paul and God certainly emphasizes that women should have good works. And when it comes to good works, we can make a long, long list as to what good works are. So obviously there's a strong role for women in the church. And I'll tell you that through my years of being in the Lord's church, my observation is that women are more rich in good works than men. I don't know. Maybe I just that's my personal opinion. But you know, maybe we should spend a little bit of time, because certainly men can do good works too, right? They do sometimes. No, men do too. But women also. Well, the men sometimes are a little slow, right? I mean, women seems to be like the one to take more initiative, and even sometimes kick the men in the pants around her. But what are some good works? Let's just give some examples of good works. Just take maybe a couple of minutes. What are some good works that women can do? Loving service, as we said.
I wouldn't say just women could do this, but we could do it too. I mean, just writing cards and things like that to
Yeah.
members that aren't here, or
Yeah.
just notes of encouragement.
Yeah.
That's not just women, though. That's all of us.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, sir.
You invite your neighbors to come to church.
Yes. Women do that. Yes. Everybody can do that. But again, my focus is on women, right? So, yeah, everybody can do that. But what are some works sometimes that we see women do? Lisa?
You can call people, you can visit people, you can help people, you can, I mean, the list is endless. And I mean, outside of the church, that's one thing, but, you know, there's needs in the church that we need to pay attention to and you know, make sure that everybody in the church's needs are met. I mean, there's needs in the church, you just have to know what they are.
Yeah.
Find that out, you talk to people and find
Yeah.
out what their needs are.
Yeah, it's true. But you see, sometimes also it is a matter of us sharing those needs. And you know, obviously, if I don't know, it's like you can participate in sharing those needs. And oftentimes, it is a family, all of us, that should be involved. I'm not going to bring a specific example, but you know, we recently met a need for somebody in the church, and some people just overheard and said, "Hey, how come you didn't ask me? I could have helped a little bit." And it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," you know. But that person wanted to do good deeds too, and to some extent, you rob them of that. So oftentimes it's just sharing, you know, whenever there's a need, and oftentimes people are not involved in meeting those needs because they simply don't know the need is there. Some people, you know, really they don't always know what's going on. You know, they're not so close to. Yes, sir.
You know, one of the things that I think more specifically women and men,
Yeah.
everything we're talking about right now, all of us can do.
Of course.
You say clean the building, well, everybody can clean the building.
Right.
You know, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But when we have potlucks, whatever house you're having that potluck, the stress is on the woman.
Yeah, it's true.
Because I guarantee at my house, I'm probably not much help. I don't do what I'm asked to do, but I don't forward think as to, okay, we're preparing for a potluck.
Yes, it's true.
I don't make any of the food.
Well,
Be thankful for that.
yeah.
But you know, the thing is, there's things, and I think that sometimes we always think that there's only spiritual things that we talk about when it comes to God. Think about Martha and her sister. You know, Lord,
Yeah,
sisters left me to serve.
yeah,
Sometimes it's not always about serving.
yeah.
Sometimes it's about the, you know, that connection with the spiritual things versus
Yeah.
physical things. So it's probably a lot of good works that we can't even come to mind, because I know there's a lot of silence in this when you say specifically women. But women do a lot. You know, whether it's herding the children, you know, preparing meals, you know, just
Yeah.
the very sound of the voice is
Yeah. Yeah.
to many versus, you know, it's all the men's.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and not just around potlucks. If I believe that a lot of the service is around, really around, and I feel bad to say this because I'm a lot like you, Rhett, you know, when it comes to really keeping the house, right? I mean, I agree that men and women should take, you know, even roles. I mean, there's no jobs that are just for women. I mean, to some extent, obviously there's some separations, but it's just whatever is commonly agreed. But you know, my opinion is, and just my opinion, is that when it comes to doing stuff, most commonly women are ahead of the men when it comes to really in this space of service, you know, others focused. Somebody had their hand up? No, John?
My father-in-law once said, "Man, am I glad I have a job to go to." Because at home, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, that's true, but for men, even though you have a job and you come home, and then what do? Well, you're just gonna sit down and do nothing. Well, your job is not over. I mean, for a man that really understands his roles, you never stop, because guess what? Ladies never stop. I mean, it's not like, okay, I worked all day, honey, now I'm just gonna sit down because you sit down. There's a quote that says that a man can work from dusk to dawn, but a woman's work is never done, right? And that's very important. So anyways, we could spend a lot more time here, but as many people said, if we constantly ask ourselves, what can I do for others? What can I do for others? You'll never be an end to how much you can do for others. So verse 10, and then verse 11 says, let a woman learn in silence with all submission. And I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. So verses 11 and 12 here, it opens a little different perspective on the roles of women and men, which frankly, even among churches, it's very controversial because this is what it says, but then a lot of people in a lot of churches don't like this, and a lot of women don't like this, and they find a way around to still do this and somehow say, but it's okay, right? So the word here does not refer a complete absence of speaking, but an attitude, a spirit of disposition. The same word is used in 1 Timothy chapter 2:2 to describe a quiet and tranquil life. Let's read chapter 2 in 1 Timothy, please. If I can have somebody read 1 Timothy 2:2. So it says, let a woman learn in silence. Lisa?
For kings and all who are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence.
So that's the same word that is used. If presidents and kings and all the rulers rule, everybody's supposed to lead a quiet life. That doesn't mean everybody's supposed to just be silent and not ever say a word. So when it comes to the learning, I'm not talking, you know, when a woman is supposed to teach, that's different. But the first section there, first verse 11 says, let a woman learn in silence. So what does that mean? We have a learning platform here. Does that mean that because the women are learning, I hope that the women are learning too, does that mean that they cannot utter a sound right now? They cannot speak at all? They should be silent, muted? Sir?
When I was teaching class in Hayward, I had a number of older women
Yeah.
that would refuse to say anything during the class because they were afraid that they were going to somehow usurp
Authority?
Yeah, I'm sure they'd come up to me after the class.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to do it during the class.
Yeah.
Because I'm a woman.
I see. And you know, some women feel this way, and of course there's nothing, it's between them and God, you know, and their understanding. Verse 11, however, and you will go later in verse 12 because it talks about women teaching, and that's a different context, a different really activity that a woman would do when you take an authority role in the teaching. But we certainly, I hope that we're on the same page, that when we have, a Bible study, right, and in the proper settings, that women learning in silence does not mean that a woman should be just quiet and not say a word. Again, in certain settings, and of course it matters. It matters how the woman carries herself, the same way that it matters how a man carries themselves. I mean, you could be a man and still be obnoxious and loud and just kind of take over the Bible study from the pew, right? So there's definitely a right attitude that we all should have towards each other. But also let's read in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 12. Do you have that, Andrea?
Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living.
So again, the same word, quietly. That doesn't mean just don't say anything and just kind of be like that horse. So it means just don't be so obnoxious to everybody to just constantly distract the attention beyond you. So that's kind of the spirit that is mentioned here. Yes, sir?
So does silence not mean not to speak? Because my understanding, maybe I don't understand, silence to me, my definition is if you're to be silent, you're not to speak.
So I'm glad we have this conversation. So the words are a bit different. When it says silence here and silence here, you see there's two different. We're going to talk a little bit later as to what it means when it comes to I do not permit a woman to teach, have authority over men, but to be in silence. So there's different, we're going to get to that word in a minute because the word is different. The woman, when it comes to teaching, should be silent. It should be, in a little bit later, we're going to see another passage where it says that a woman are supposed to be silent, in settings, in the church, in the assembly, of the church together. Yes?
Isn't it more of like they can't really ask questions that would question your authority as a man, right?
So,
Because I know,
yeah.
and then also if you have questions, that's when you go home and ask your husband.
So yes, and we're going to read a passage in the future. So still, in the context we are talking now, verse 11, learning silence with all submission. We're having a conversation about this. Does that mean a woman cannot ask a question? I'm talking in certain settings. Obviously there's settings to where, like, we have later we're going to have a worship service, right, with the whole congregation together. I do believe that is a time to where women should not speak.
Men don't speak during the worship service. I mean, no one really speaks during the worship service as far as... It's true, but there is a distinction because technically a man can come up and speak, like when you speak, right? I mean, people that are involved in service can speak, but a woman can do that, right? So there are distinctions. Andrea, to go to your question, it really depends, and you're right. A woman could ask a question, or really, I've been in Bible studies, led Bible studies to where you have a specific woman in the assembly, and she just takes over. And it's a very uncomfortable situation because as the teacher, I certainly am not going to put that woman on the spot and say, just, you are usurping my authority. I mean, that's not the right way. Right up, yes, and make her confess in public. I mean, that's not tactful. I mean, that would bring her down. That should be softer ways to address it. But obviously, women and men too, for that matter, because a man can do that and still be inappropriate, right? Does that answer your question? Yes. So it doesn't mean. I mean, I don't think a woman should be so inhibited to say, "Boy, I'm afraid how to answer this question, how to ask this question." Obviously, if it comes from a right place in your heart, and you're not really seeking to prove how smart you are as a woman and how much better you know than the man who's teaching the class, then obviously it's the attitude of the heart that really matters the most. Let's also read, please, a few verses in 1 Corinthians chapter 14. 1 Corinthians 14. 34 to 38.
Lisa?
Let your women keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but they are to be submissive, as the law also says. And if they want to learn something, let them ask their own husbands at home, for it is shameful for women to speak in church. Or did the word of God come originally from you, or was it you only that it reached? If anyone thinks himself to be a prophet or spiritual, let him acknowledge that the things which I write to you are the commandments of the Lord. But if anyone is ignorant, let him be ignorant.
So obviously now, as we go into verse 12, women are not to be in position of public teaching, to where, you speak in public, right? So we see this both in verse 12, where it says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. So when it comes to the act of teaching, women, yes?
Aren't they only supposed to teach the children?
Well, of course, there's opportunity for women to teach, but we're talking about teaching, over the church. Right. So obviously, is a woman okay to teach their children at home? Like, well, she better. Of course, God expects that. And what about we have a Bible study at the class, in church, and there's a bunch of kids that need to be entertained, or there's a class that's. Can a woman teach that class? Well, she can do it at home, So of course she can do it in all kinds of settings, sir.
And we had, I don't know if you have it here, but in Hayward we have what they call Ladies' Day. And that's a Saturday set aside just for all the ladies in a variety of different local churches to show up. And they have a kind of a half-day class. And it's only women speakers that's teaching each other. And I've listened in on some of it, and they won't allow any men into the area for whatever reason. But their classes are very solid.
So hold them at the church building?
But they're at the church building.
So
It's women teaching women.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, opinions on that can be split, because there's different views on that. I know that there's, even among the churches of Christ, there are opinions are split. Some believe that that's perfectly fine. Some believe that is like the gateway to women, being comfortable to being in the pulpit, and using, the infrastructure, the resources of the church to really perform acts. And I'll tell you, essentially, they are at core, women getting together and helping each other and teaching each other. There's nothing wrong within itself. It's just that, there are concerns around that, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, one way or the other. But what happens if a man from the street comes and sits down? You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, can the woman, the woman is, you have a Monterey Church of Christ on the door, and, there's a lot of chit-chat, a lot of conversation, and then all of a sudden, somebody walks, sits down, a man, right? And he's like, no, you can't be here if you're a man. Okay, so anyways, that certainly is something that we can have a conversation on, and some churches have a practice like that, and we can discuss about it. Somebody had their hand up? Rhett?
In Cameron, it's speaking where exactly older women are told to teach the younger women to love their husbands. So there is a definite direct command that women are to teach
Yeah.
younger women.
Yeah.
Good wives, whatever.
Yeah, so again, we can expand this conversation, and we can talk about it even now. Again, I'm just telling you that there are perspectives. I've heard perspectives, and I've heard valid points from both sides of this, right? So,
keeping in mind, we always have to keep in mind the image of how it looks to others.
Right.
Yeah.
Like even how we behave
Yeah.
in public. And I think your example was great. If a man walked in and it's all women.
Yeah, I think it's true. So what they do sometimes, they would have like somebody being outside and not allow men to come. But Jeff, you had your hand up, sir.
Well, I was going to add to the point, although those are I enjoy listening to some of these, Saturday, we're not usually open on Saturdays. So
Yeah,
having some,
yeah.
Why would a man all of a sudden just appear, but that's a different issue.
Mhm.
My question was, what about somebody that doesn't have a husband?
Yeah. Me.
Well, you reach out to the
Right.
Yeah.
the elders of the church, which we don't have elders. You reach out to the preacher or another man in the congregation. It's
Yeah.
what I've always done.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Yes, sir.
There's been a number of congregations in America that all they had was women. I mean, the whole congregation was nothing but women, no men.
Yeah.
And if a man was visiting, he usually got everything
Right.
on his shoulders.
Right.
He did the singing, he did the Lord's Supper, and he did whatever preaching was necessary. But that doesn't mean, as a woman, if there's no men, you stop serving God.
Right.
And I mean, I look at Lydia, seller of purple. They didn't even have enough men there in where Philippi. They had a synagogue, so she and the women met down at the river.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting. I don't have an opinion as to what women are supposed to do and not to do, but
Yeah.
the different references in the Bible at least give us some direction
Yeah.
as to some possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll tell you, because I'm certainly not ashamed of what I believe. I mean, I'm willing and happy to entertain, everybody's in perspectives and so forth. My personal opinion is that when those events happening inside the church building, it could appear, I mean, it becomes, to a large extent, part of the work of the church, right? And then part of the work of the church, let's go to a Bible passage to see where that act is authorized. And it's just, you can find a place that all women come together for the sake of women standing up and really having that authority. Again, to me, it's more a matter of authority, and it's a matter of wisdom, because I do believe that long time ago, that's probably could be considered a reason where women getting so comfortable in the pulpit, that's what it started to. Because I've heard, even among churches of Christ, oh, and that woman is such a great speaker, and before you know it, she goes from like church to church to church. She gets invited, to these events, and then she's just in churches in the pulpit. And again, in itself, there's nothing wrong for women to teach. But, to me, it's about optics, and it's about, we appear so much like churches that are comfortable with women teaching. But again, that is just my perspective. Rhett, you had your hand up, sir.
Yeah, it's like, what's interesting to me, and I know it's hard when we talk about the church.
Yeah.
This building, this address is not the church. Just like when the church met at Chloe's house.
Yeah.
Glory, I'm pretty sure Chloe was a woman. Unless that's
Probably.
a man singing, but- So they met at Chloe.
Yeah.
A woman, that's where the church met. So if there wasn't a man there, she was still teaching. She's still teaching, quote, in the church, but not really. Because the church is only when we gather together for the express purpose to do the worship service of God. Lord's Supper, preaching, singing songs together, edifying, encouraging one another. Just because we get together and have a Bible study doesn't mean it's the church.
Okay, but this is my question. So the distinction in my mind comes because we certainly can have a Bible study at your house. You know what I mean? We certainly have a Bible study at my house. But when we come here, right, exactly. And that was my house, exactly. But when we come here, who pays the electric bill? Who pays for all these chairs? Who pays for everything? Who pays for the water, for everything? Guess what? It's not my money. It's the Lord's money. So therefore, it becomes a question. We need to have a different kind of awareness as to the resources that we spend and how, right?
Well, that
Right.
begs the question.
Yeah.
When did the first church building
Wow, we go and
anything in the
yes,
Bible?
yes.
Hey, you go build a church. Don't go teach. make
Yes.
disciples. And
So,
that in a number of
yes.
people's houses,
Right.
from house to house.
Right.
But nowhere will
Right.
you find in there that they built a quote synagogue or church type building.
So,
And you find the authority
right.
to do so.
yeah.
How?
Well, how is there's the answer. So how is because we have the commandment, the same thing we have the commandment to sing, and then we have church songbooks. So obviously when it comes to the commandment to meet, like when it says go, right? Go and preach the gospel, or you can walk if you want to preach the gospel in Alaska, but it's much easier to take a flight there. Does it say take a flight? The same thing with us when it comes to come together. And I'll tell you, we can meet at people's houses. We've met in my house for a year, and I'll tell you, it's fine, it worked, but it's not the most ideal situation. You know, somebody comes to worship God at 10 o'clock in the morning and they say, hey, can I have some breakfast because I forgot to get breakfast? Okay, there you go. You know, you can go set to the fridge. And then they're eating in the kitchen while you have a Bible study. It's not ideal. Therefore, you know, you think, what can we do? Can you rent? I mean, there's many different ways, because I know right now we can meet outside. But when it's summer, Jeff, would you come over to Bible study outside in the desert?
I would, but it'd be wrong. Can I wear shorts?
But during Christ's time, they had rural villages. They didn't have synagogues
Right.
in some of the poorer areas.
Right.
And they met in the center outside.
And that's perfectly fine, yes.
And it was desert.
And that's perfectly fine, yes.
That was accommodating for that particular area.
And that's absolutely an authorized way. There's no doubt about it. It's just that the distinction to me, and actually we can study this further, is that if we make the decision as a congregation to identify a place, you know, to pull money from the contribution, really to purchase that place, you know, that now becomes part of the work of the church. And, you know, every time we use any money for the Lord, it needs to be used with authority. You know, like another question is, can we have here, you know, a potluck? One may say, well, why not? Can we rent this place and make money for weddings and so forth? You may say, well, why not? Well, because, you know, that would go outside of, you know, the confounds of show me where do we have authority to do that. And, you know, one would have a hard time finding, you know. So we can do that just even to raise money. Well, this building is not used but a few hours a week. Why not? We can rent it. We can rent it to other churches that can meet here, and we can make a couple of bucks. But show me the authority for that. Sir?
I'd like to read in Matthew 18, verse 20. It says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them.
And it's true.
Doesn't matter where you meet.
No, it doesn't matter. You're absolutely correct. We're absolutely correct. It's just that, so coming back full circle, and I appreciate this conversation, Rhett is right in that really you don't have to be in a church building, right? You can be anywhere. So verse 12 there, it says, I do not permit a woman to have authority over a man but to be in silence. So the passage we read in chapter 14 of 1 Corinthians talks about, you know, obviously we're in the church. And yes, Rhett is right. It's not church, not we're in a church building. Because you can be it's really the context there. It's when the church comes together. It's when the church is assembled. When you come together for the purpose of worship. When you are assembled together as a church. That's really, because you can be assembled to go to the park and play baseball. I mean, that's not the church, right? I mean, you can be part of the church, but church is when you get assembled, and that's really when these standards apply. Rhett.
Remember, I think it was in Acts where, I don't know, might be a male, but he calls in question all this uproar because they're in an unlawful assembly. So, the church, when we say, hey, we're going to meet at this time for the express purpose to worship God and do these things,
Yeah.
that's the assembly.
Yes, absolutely,
You know?
absolutely.
And I know it's a play on words, but we have Bible studies, and we have our worship to God, and
Yeah.
we do specific things.
Yeah.
And that's where I know a lot of these things kind of come up. And
Yeah.
it's just always interesting on the whole spectrum. But the word church itself just literally means assembly.
Exactly. It's a
Whatever
ecclesia,
expression is
coming together. Yes. Yeah, I mean, and the church building then is no different than a songbook. I think Jeff, and then John.
We probably moved on from it. but
We did, yes.
I'm just gonna
That's
circle
okay.
back for a second. We talked about, you know, it's iffy to have an all women's Bible study here. What if we had an all men's Bible study here? Is that?
Well, so the distinction, the roles of women are different, right? So the Bible does say that, you know, verse 12, I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, right? So can you have a Bible study at the church building as women? Of course. I mean, if you can come as women together, right? And you can have a Bible study, and it doesn't matter where. I mean, I certainly believe that you can use the resources of the church to have a Bible study, or let's say you have a Bible study with the men of the street, or and you rather, instead of going to a Starbucks, you can come here and have a Bible study. That's certainly acceptable. Again, the distinction in my mind is when you have that platform to where women are given a proeminent role, and you put them in a position to address an audience as if they are, right here at home in this pulpit. So again, to me, it's not a matter of contention in that it's just that this is how I'm coming from. It's certainly between you and God how you feel on this matter. Somebody had their hand up. John, did you have an up, sir? Go ahead.
Throughout the years, I've had, dialogue with the brethren about, a Woman's Day event. Now, is that the same thing as women getting together for a Bible study? What happens when women get together in a Women's Day event? For example, if we pass out flyers, Monterey Church of Christ Ladies' Day event, first annual, let's say. But what happens in that event? You got singing, you got prayer, you got Bible study, worship. The only thing they don't do is
Lord's Supper.
the Lord's Supper. Now is that I was gonna say what Jeff said, is that wrong? Because what happens if men get together, on a Saturday and do the same? Is there a difference, Because when the on Saturday you got all women, but it's not
Yeah.
entire church.
Yeah. So John, the nuance that I see is that it stems from what we are talking here, that I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. You finish, please.
So what I'm saying is that is there a difference between gathering, as worship as a church on Sunday and women day event on Saturday, and having to basically worship, singing, prayers. I think they I don't know what happens in there totally, but they exchange gifts. They have a meal.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
some brethren they're against that. Even women
Yeah.
are against
Yeah.
Ladies' Day.
Yeah.
But
In my preparation of studying for this study, I really was afraid that we're going to end up at this topic. And I said, boy, I don't want to touch this topic because it's so... He started. It's okay. Thank you, sir. It's good. Yes.
about being sensitive with the brethren, what happens when members don't disagree with that let's say there's
Yes.
local congregation
Yes.
starts
Yes.
having, annual
Right.
Ladies' Day event.
Right. So I'll tell you. So we have another 4 minutes. We definitely are not going to kill this topic right now. So what I would like to share is that whether you believe that that's okay or whether you believe that is not, obviously we need to not look at each other and say, well, you're very spiritually mature because you clearly don't understand this matter. I think we have to really make a greater effort to really first have the right attitude towards one another and just kind of try to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and see if we can come somewhere together to some consensus, or to really come to where we are on the same page, if possible, just like we should have in all, and not have this be a cause of distress over the church. A lot of people, this is very passionate topic.
Brother, I want to say very quickly.
Yes.
Also, I had other dialogues with brethren about Bible colleges. You know what I mean? It's like, is the Bible clear on women's day event? Like for example, we know what baptism is. Worshiping as a church, the singing and all that. But where
Yeah.
you get solid verses.
Yeah.
That the women get together, or as an example in the New Testament, that the women got together. And
Yeah.
As the ladies' day,
Yeah. So yes.
Same thing with Bible colleges. Some brethren disagree, some brother agree. And
Yeah.
You know, we're supposed to have Bible colleges and send our children to learn how, you know, be preachers and so on.
Well, I mean, obviously, that's not necessarily the work of the church. You know what I'm saying? That's a little bit different. If you can have Bible colleges, I mean, now we go even further. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to keep everybody on this topic, and you're like, God, taking me in the desert. Let me see. And then he drops the mic and he walks out. Yes, sir. And we're gonna. Yes, you had a hand up first.
Kind of my perspective and understanding on this topic is exactly what you said. You're keeping it, this is a topic of what's in the church. And what's in the church, there's clearly defined roles. It's not that a woman or a man is better than the other person. My understanding is it's the role of a man in the church, and then women have their roles. So whenever it kind of goes out on these different topics,
Yes.
I come back to the structure and the roles of each of us in the church. That's the way I
No, I mean, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. So,
it doesn't get
yeah.
gray and so confusing.
Yeah.
And it's not that one's better than the other, because like you said, women are great speakers. I mean, everyone has a talent.
Yeah.
But we have to go back to what's the roles in the church.
In the church, that's the key. Yes, absolutely. Because obviously, there's nothing wrong with women teaching other women, right? I mean, in this case. Or at Starbucks or in many other places. And I would even say even here, if it's in the right, if it's a one-on-one, right? Or, just not. Rhett?
You know, one of the questions I've always had is because we are talking about this here and now in 2023.
Yeah.
What were they doing 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago? What were they doing when Jesus was present on earth? Think about the role of men and the role of women then versus how much has changed. I mean, it wasn't until when we were basically founding America and the presidential aspect that we actually had a women's convention actually back then. And think of how many years it took just to get to the point where women had the right to vote.
Yeah.
When did they pass that? 1920. See, there's a woman that knows history. 1920. Now, that's only 103 years ago. So we're talking about things that were totally different then than they are now, and women really did not have all of the freedoms or all of the abilities to do things outside of the family and the home as they do now. I think it was World War II that actually opened up the door for women just to get out in the workplace.
Right. So obviously, our time is almost up. I will say, though, that even though the societies evolve, even though obviously there's a lot has happened around the role of the women in society, always get back to this passage right here where it says that I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority. So make sure you have that there in the mix, because this is not going away just because it's 2023. And that's why we're only making such little progress, because it's not easy. But I'm sorry, time is up. I appreciate everybody's attention, and we will, we're 2 minutes late, we are going to study this next week again. Thank you. Please be here.